A single sting from this insect can rot a hole into human flesh. Not swell, not blister, rot. A permanent scar, carved into skin by venom alone, from a creature barely the length of your thumb. No claws, no fangs, just a few micrograms of chemistry, and a target left permanently marked. Meet the executioner wasp, and that is not a nickname someone gave it for shock value. Its scientific name, Polistes carnifex, comes directly from the Latin word for executioner. Someone, at some point, decided this insect deserved that title in its actual taxonomy. That should tell you everything about what's coming. Strangely, the English nickname didn't exist for most of this species' recorded history. It's native to regions where English wasn't the primary language, so for decades it simply had no popular name outside scientific papers. It wasn't until relatively recently, when wildlife content creators started actively seeking out the most painful stings on the planet, that the nickname executioner wasp caught on in English-speaking circles at all. In other words, this creature has been terrifying people in its native range for centuries. The rest of the world only just caught up. At first glance, it doesn't look like a monster. It's a paper wasp, the same general family as the ones that build those gray, papery nests under your roof. Bright yellow body, faint brown striping, unremarkable at a glance. But it's bigger than almost every other wasp in its genus, stretching up to 3 centimeters long, and it's carrying a weapon most insects on Earth can't compete with. Here's where the science gets genuinely disturbing. Entomologists rank insect stings using something called the Schmidt Pain Index, a 4-point scale built by a scientist who let himself get stung by dozens of species just to document exactly how much each one hurt. Level 1 is a mild annoyance. Level 4 is the top of the scale, reserved for the absolute worst pain the insect world can produce. The executioner wasp sits at a full 4, not close to it, at it, alongside only a small handful of other species on the entire planet, including the infamous bullet ant. But pain alone isn't what makes this wasp genuinely dangerous. It's what happens after the pain. The venom is hemotoxic, meaning it doesn't just trigger nerve signals, it actively breaks down the cells around the sting site. That's not swelling from irritation, that's tissue death. Localized necrosis, in the sting site itself, sometimes severe enough to leave a permanent scar carved into the skin. One well-documented case, filmed for a wildlife series, showed the sting site rotting and scarring for days afterward, long after the initial pain had supposedly peaked. But pain alone isn't what makes this wasp genuinely dangerous. It's what happens after the pain. The venom is hemotoxic, meaning it doesn't just trigger nerve signals, it actively breaks down the cells around the sting site. That's not swelling from irritation, that's tissue death. Localized necrosis, in the sting site itself, sometimes severe enough to leave a permanent scar carved into the skin. One well-documented case, filmed for a wildlife series, showed the sting site rotting and scarring for days afterward, long after the initial pain had supposedly peaked. The venom itself is a cocktail engineered for maximum damage. Inside it are enzymes called phospholipases, which physically break apart the membranes of your cells. There are compounds, called mastoperins, which trigger your body's own immune cells to dump histamine into the wound, amplifying the swelling and inflammation far beyond what the venom alone would cause. There's serotonin, which directly intensifies the pain signal traveling to your brain. And there are kinins, inflammatory compounds that keep the whole reaction escalating long after the sting itself is over. It's not one mechanism causing the damage. It's 4 or 5, all firing at once, all stacking on top of each other. And it doesn't stop at one sting. Unlike a bee, which loses its stinger and dies after a single attack, the executioner wasp stinger stays smooth and intact, meaning it can sting you again and again, as many times as it wants, each strike delivering another dose of the same tissue-destroying venom. Now here's the part that turns this from a bad afternoon into a genuine emergency. This wasp doesn't fight alone. When it feels threatened, it releases an alarm pheromone, a chemical signal broadcast to every wasp in the colony within range. That signal means one thing: attack. Within seconds, you're not facing one executioner wasp, you're facing a swarm of them, all converging on the same target, all carrying the same level 4 venom, all willing to sting repeatedly. This kind of coordinated defense isn't unique to executioner wasps, but the combination of a mass alarm response and a level 4 venom payload is what makes this particular species stand apart. Most animals have to choose between overwhelming numbers or overwhelming individual firepower. This wasp gets both. A single wasp already has one of the most punishing stings on the planet. Multiply that by an entire colony responding within seconds, and you've got a defense system that very few animals in the tropics are willing to challenge twice. Picture that for a second. One sting is already rated the worst pain the insect kingdom can inflict. Now multiply that by a dozen wasps, each stinging multiple times, each dose stacking necrotic damage on top of the last. For most healthy adults, a swarm attack like that would still likely be survivable, but deeply unpleasant doesn't begin to cover it. For anyone with an allergy to wasp venom, or anyone elderly, very young, or with an existing heart condition, a mass attack like this can escalate into something genuinely life-threatening through anaphylactic shock or systemic reaction. Here's a question worth sitting with while we're in the thick of this. If you had 30 seconds warning that you disturbed an executioner wasp nest, would you try to slowly back away without triggering the alarm pheromone? Or would you just run and accept a few stings on the way out? There's no clean right answer, and honestly, entomologists still debate which instinct actually works better in the field. Let me know which one you'd trust yourself to pull off. Despite everything you've just heard, here's the twist almost nobody expects. The executioner wasp is not naturally aggressive. It doesn't hunt humans. It doesn't go out of its way to sting anything that isn't threatening its nest directly. Wildlife researchers who've spent time around wild colonies describe them as surprisingly calm, almost indifferent to human presence, right up until the moment their home is disturbed. This isn't a monster stalking the jungle floor looking for a victim. It's a homeowner with an unreasonably effective security system. And it only activates when someone kicks down a front door. That distinction matters because it reframes everything about this creature. Evolution didn't build the executioner wasp to be aggressive. It built it to be undeniable. A threat so catastrophic that nothing, not predators, not curious animals, not clumsy humans, wants to test it twice. The pain isn't cruelty. It's a message encoded directly into venom, broadcast the instant something crosses the line. Leave and never come back. And that message works. Very few predators bother hunting adult executioner wasps. The energy cost of surviving even one successful sting, let alone a coordinated swarm response, makes them a spectacularly bad meal choice for almost anything in their ecosystem. Dragonflies are one of the rare exceptions, occasionally picking off wasps in midair before they can retaliate. But on the ground in the colony, this species has almost no natural enemies willing to take the risk. Even within their own nests, executioner wasps run a surprisingly organized society. Colonies can range from a handful of wasps to well over 100, all working from a shared paper comb built out of chewed plant fiber, layered into a lightweight but sturdy structure. The nest hangs from a narrow stalk called a pedicel, a deliberate bottleneck that makes it harder for crawling predators like ants to reach the brood inside. Some paper wasps even coat that stalk in ant-repellent secretions, turning the one vulnerable entry point into another defensive layer. Every part of this insect's existence, from its venom to its architecture, seems built around the same underlying philosophy. Make yourself as difficult to threaten as possible, and let that reputation do the rest of the work. There's something almost elegant about that, in a horrifying sort of way. This isn't an animal that needs speed, size, or camouflage to survive. It survives because every other creature in its ecosystem has learned, generation after generation, that the cost of testing it is simply too high. That's not brute strength. That's reputation, built entirely out of chemistry, and it's worked for this species for a very long time. Native to Central and South America, from Mexico down through the northern reaches of South America, the executioner wasp thrives in humid tropical forests, forest edges, and increasingly, the eaves and rooflines of human buildings. As people build further into its natural range, encounters are becoming more frequent, not because the wasp is changing, but because we keep moving into its neighborhood. It's a pattern that shows up again and again in nature. The aggressive animal usually isn't the one that changed the terms of the relationship. We are. So the next time something insists it's harmless until provoked, maybe take that warning seriously. This wasp isn't hunting you. It's just extremely, spectacularly clear about the consequences if you don't respect the boundary. And unlike most warnings in nature, this one comes with a scientifically documented, level 4 tissue melting guarantee that it means exactly what it says. No ambiguity, no bluff, no second warning. Just consequences, delivered exactly as promised, every single time. Before we wrap up, if this is the kind of thing that keeps you coming back to this channel, make sure you're subscribed, because we go looking for the most extreme survival stories in nature every single week, and this one is far from the strangest. So here's the question I actually want an answer to. Given the choice between facing this wasp sting once, or facing a swarm of regular hornets 10 times over, which gamble would you actually take? Tell me your answer, and tell me why, because I genuinely don't think there's an easy choice here.